Hello, and welcome to the third session of the Advocacy three-part panel series on equity, diversity, and resiliency within architectural education and the profession. This is the third and final session, and it will be focusing on resiliency within all of these different realms. We currently have about 5 panelists on board. I believe we may have one more joining us shortly. But before we actually get into the meat of this, I think that we all would appreciate a formal introduction. I will begin. My name is Amy Rosen. I am the current Northeast Quad Director for AIAS, the American Institute of Architecture students. And I went to Carnegie Mellon University for my Bachelor of Architecture, as well as my Master of Science in Sustainable Design. And I'm currently located in Pittsburgh. Adam, would you mind introducing yourself?
Hey everyone, I'm Adam Fogel. I'm currently the Freedom by Design Advisory Group Chair. I attend the Illinois Institute of Technology over in Chicago, and I am in my first year of my graduate program there.
All right, thank you. Kevin, would you mind going next?
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Kevin. I am currently the Design Think Tank Chair for this year. I am from Andrews University in Michigan, and I am currently the past chapter president of the chapter.
Perfect. Thank you. Maria and Camila, would you guys mind introducing yourselves?
Hi, my name is Maria Isabel Brunet. I was the vice president for the Polytechnic University of Puerto Rico chapter. I am currently in my 5th and final year of my bachelor in architecture, and I live in San Juan, Puerto Rico.
And my name is Camila Lopez, and I'm the Public Relations Director in the Polytechnic University of Puerto Rico, the AIAS chapter, and I'm also in my 5th year of my bachelor, and we're currently doing our thesis, and I live in Bayamón, Puerto Rico.
Awesome, thank you. Last but not least.
Hey everyone, my name is Paul Babson. I'm currently the graduate representative at the University of Tennessee. I am in a Master's of Landscape Architecture program. I did get my Bachelor of Architecture as well here at the University of Tennessee, and so I've been in school for quite some time. So I'll be done in May though, so that's good.
Awesome. Welcome everyone. I'm so glad that we all managed to get here today. I think one of the most important things about these panels is that we get a wide range of students representing a wide range of cultures and areas. And I think that this is going to be a really exciting conversation. So let's get started. The first question for the panel is basically, I want you all to define resiliency under your own lens. What perspective do you have as a designer when you hear the word resiliency? And how have you brought it into your life or your practice as an architect or future architect?
I can go ahead and get started. So it was the 4th year, which was our integrations or comprehensive semester, where we had to bring together all of the tools that we have gathered over our time in architecture school. And I really started getting into urban design and wider issues that affect the built and urban environment. And as going through the education of architecture, you start learning about a lot of the issues that plague the world, and with issues like climate change, global warming, sea level rise coming, you have to become very conscious of that. And that's part of the reason why I decided to get my master's in landscape architecture, was because landscape architects were also thinking about these issues, but on a different lens. And so they're thinking about how, water's moving on the landscape, how plants and ecology play a role in the health of those natural systems, and how those can be tied in using design. And so in my opinion, resiliency is not fighting nature or holding it back, which is what a lot of our infrastructure has been over the past several hundred years, but embracing it in new and interesting ways to where we're not dreading the next flood event or the next hurricane, but it doesn't actually end up slowing us down.
Awesome. Thank you, Paul. I think those are all excellent points, and they're all really important to realize early in life, especially while you're a student.
I'll go ahead and jump on. So for me, resiliency has always been the ability to bounce back from something, whether or not that's a natural disaster or something personal in your life, right? This sense of resiliency can go a long way. And so the way I've kind of applied it to my education is by coming to a school that focused more on city planning. A lot of the grad program at IIT deals with infrastructure and that sort of thing. And so by coming to a school that's in an amazing city, I've learned different ways that the city's adapted to like the lake and sustainability issues as far as the bubbly creek is what they call it. It's a whole meat packing and like just bad things. Anyway, it's always been a great way to learn about infrastructure. So,
thanks, Adam.
Yeah, I would have to agree with Adam in the sense that I always saw it as what you have to do or what you should do after a natural disaster happens, or not only a natural disaster, or when human nature something that you have to like how you that in the future and how you adapt to the circumstances that are happening right now in the local surrounding. My sorry, this just like stupid. But I always see it as that you have to adapt and look at what's happening and see how you can leave or if you marry the island. It definitely how people in our communities were acting upon that situation and saying, okay, well,
Oh, would you mind leaning in a little bit more to the mic, I think, unless anybody else? There we go. Perfect. Thank you.
Basically, how you adapt to the situation that happened and prevent that situation from happening in the future.
In my case, I see resilience as before I start studying architecture, like how we can see the worst case, how we can prevent it, or seeing the worst case scenario, how we can do architecture, thinking what can be worse, even the good or the worst thing that can happen, and how we can actually learn from these disasters, how we can do better architecture, because in Puerto Rico, they don't follow a lot of rules that they supposed to, and we can have like a great architecture, but they don't think about it. So that's how I see it.
Exactly. I think that you both brought up something really important. It's that architecture has the ability to both negatively and positively impact people and communities. And the fact that we have a lot of power, and it's something that people don't necessarily process or take advantage of as a designer. And like you said, I think it's critical given the fact that so many life-changing things can happen in a moment's notice. And we can't necessarily predict them all. So we need to act proactively and act preventatively. Moving forward, I think a few of you touched upon how your education has really introduced you to resiliency. So I guess I want to more formally ask, how has architectural education reframed your understanding of this topic and this field?
I can jump in. I agree with everybody's definition of resiliency. In our school, we have an urban design studio, which is in the master's program, which I am in right now. And the urban design studio really touches on community design. So like especially we this year in our studio our project was in Puerto Rico, which is to kind of design the urban master plan and also housing and various other urban spaces for this community in San Juan, which is located in an area that's very low level and it's always prone to flooding. And so, and then of course you guys know Hurricane Maria happened. And so that literally happened the week before we were supposed to go to Puerto Rico for our field trip. And so the whole studio basically became this whole conversation of just resilient design. Like how can we make sure that our design proposal is going to be something that's going to be resilient against hurricanes or something that's going to be resilient against flooding. And so just the design studio topic itself, just being very involved, very community-based, I think helps to touch on, because I think community-based design is also part of resiliency too, which is also kind of a part of sustainability and the bigger spectrum. But in our school, the urban design studio really focuses on that, and that's like how it really is involved in our education, and all students go through that.
Great. Thank you, Kevin. I think that's honestly one of those unique experiences that you can only have as an architecture student, thinking about these topics while they're actually being brought up as national or international issues. I'm actually curious about what some of the initiatives or suggestions you all had or that you came up with, if you wouldn't mind maybe developing on that a little bit.
Oh yeah, so like, and more specific of the project itself?
Yeah, if you're willing to dispense on your brilliant ideas.
So, I mean, so of course we, so the main program for the project, rather, it's, we had to design at least about a housing site for about 100 over people. And also we had to design a water plaza, which is a public space, and also we had to design a transit site. So basically, you know, the idea of the water plaza is that it is this public space that ends up holding water in case there's flooding, like, because this place is prone to flooding, and so the water plazas are located along the canal, which is the canal that's and so these public spaces becomes spaces that, you know, could absorb or hold water, and it becomes the first barrier of defense before it affects people's homes. And then of course, you know, when you talk about housing design, you know, you raise your buildings up so that you prevent flood water from coming into the house and stuff like that. And then also, you know, the material of the houses that you use to make sure that it's sustainable and it's also environmentally like resilient to that kind of weather. And so just that basic ideas of how we can use design to prevent kind of prevent these kind of environmental disasters or natural disasters in that sense, but not prevent it, but more of like help to improve the situation in case something something strikes.
Totally. Yeah. Before I ask that Maria and Camila sort of touch on this topic as well, since it's interesting that, Kevin, you had the opportunity to address this from a distant perspective. You were detached from the local scene and you were trying to connect with it, which is admirable. But then there's the whole other side where you're actually immersed in it when it's happening. And actually, before we do that, I would like to introduce our sixth panelist. Jordan, if you wouldn't mind saying your name, where you go to school, and where you're currently living, and if you held a position at your AIAS chapter.
Hi there. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
All right, perfect. Yeah, I was having some technical issues before. So I'm a recent graduate of the University of Houston. I was a former chapter president there. And I'm sorry, what was the other question, Amy?
Oh, just you mentioned it, I think. Your school, your name. We're all good. Yeah. Thank you. Jordan, the question that we're currently addressing is, how has architectural education reframed your understanding of resiliency? And I'm going to let Maria and Camila give me her answer, but think on that for a moment.
Okay, well, talking from like experience, sadly, the actual the first issue that we faced was that Puerto Rico is a very small island, but we have a lot of mountains, and we depend a lot on motorized vehicles around the island. So when the hurricane struck, all our forestry and vegetation fell, so we didn't have communication with anyone, actually. You were stuck in your house, and if you didn't have any water, you were in bad circumstances. If you didn't have a generator, you couldn't power your refrigerator, so all your food supplies spoiled. If you didn't have food that was in tightly sealed packages like cans and bags. The other issue we had was that really hard to live in a place that doesn't really think about urban planning as such a big priority, because since you depend so much on the car, you don't really know how to get places walking so that you can see your family, so that you can see if you can help anyone in your community. And we were actually facing that problem because we were working on a written thesis during the hurricane. And our professor is really adamant and emphasizes a lot about community workshops and how your thesis can impact a certain community in specific. So thesis was based around elderly communities and kids between 2 and 5, and we had that situation where the elderly people didn't have any way to get clean drinking water or water to bathe themselves because they didn't have cisterns or any water tanks. Like Kevin was saying that his thesis was mostly based, not your thesis, but your project had a water tank involved in it, right?
It's like a water plaza, so it's like a bigger public space that kind of holds water. Yeah.
Well, a water plaza. So if you lived in those elderly communities, you were kind of defenseless, and you were relying on governmental help to come to your communities to help you.
Right.
Another problem was that since you're in an elderly community, it's usually a very tall building. Older people do not go downstairs easily or upstairs easily. You had to work on your generator. You had to like ration your diesel and gasoline supply so that it would last until who knows when the electricity came back. Half of the island still doesn't have electricity, so they're still facing that today. And they don't have clean water. So it really emphasizes the point that we have to think about resiliency in our projects, not just when we're designing them, but after this happens, you have to think, okay, well, if I'm designing an elderly community in a kids space, it has to have a generator. It has to have a water tank. It has to have accessibility to local hospitals. It has to have it has to be walking distance to natural resources. And this is what our teacher usually tells us is go to your communities, ask them what they need, and then design based on that and make sustainable design that can last during a 100-year hurricane or a flood or a major water swell like what just happened. I think like 15 schools closed because of the water swell that happened during the weekend because they're so close to the ocean. They do not respect the water. The water. I can't really say in English. It's marítimo terrestre. In Spanish, that's how you say it, but it's where how much water goes into the land during an event like this. They don't respect that, so we have that consequence in the island that's not respected at all. So, talking about resiliency, we have to look at what the problem is and how we address the future buildings that we make, respecting those natural laws that are not really written, but they're implemented every day, every year. Every time this happens, you have to think about that.
Yes, we're not like we're kind of like trying to fix the problems that happened because of Maria. And in my case, for example, in my thesis, because we're in the same section, we have to we have basically like a project after Maria, so we have to think about everything that happened. And in my case, I'm doing an oncology clinic in a small island of Puerto Rico that is called Vieques. And in that case, they don't have any communication with the bigger part of the island. So you have to you have to receive cancer treatment. You need to go in a ship to go to Fajardo, and then you have to come back. So in my case, after Maria, I'm trying to do this more like a bunker, how I can make this hurricane proof or something. So as an architecture design, we can see like we see the worst case scenario, and now we're trying to get it better. We can make a better design from it.
Totally. I think that it's amazing that you two like persevered along with everybody else that you're engaging with, and your entire communities have found a way to work together, because there's so many issues and adversities that you're being forced to face, whether it's not your choice. It just happens to be with your location and the geographical situations that you are immersed in. Obviously, at a much smaller scale, I've been investigating stormwater management in Pittsburgh for my master's thesis. And it's something that I think everybody thus far has really touched upon water. And despite all of the other issues that go into being a resilient city or community or nation or globe, I think water right now, in my opinion, is the most dramatic. It's what we rely on. It sustains life, and somehow right now it's honestly destroying lives at a rate that we need to, like, as you mentioned, Maria, we need to address now. It shouldn't be something we tack on to our studio projects. It's something that should be introduced at the forefront and integrated into every step.
Exactly. Just like in Africa, South Africa, they have a water shortage. People are fighting over gallons of water, and the prices are going up. So if you don't have a bag of them before, you might actually not have water during this drought. And people in the mountainous area in our island made like Puerto Rican aqueducts.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, they put together bamboo sticks to bring water to their towns. It sounds like super archaic, but totally worked.
Yeah.
And
it's really nice. I'm working right now with the Blue Tar project of the corporate engineers, and it's extremely sad that it happened 6 months like already from Maria, and there's people that they still live in places that they don't have any roof, they don't have any walls, and they don't have any power or water. So it's really, really hard. So we're trying to think our project, like our thesis, how we can do it better. Like if this happens, they can still be in the place and they can still work. Like that's what we're trying to do.
Totally. I think something else that's really unique about this experience and this disaster is that it was not the only one happening at that time. This was, I believe, according to USA Today, I have an article up, 2017 was the costliest hurricane season in US history, and September was the single most powerful month ever recorded in the Atlantic in terms of hurricane intensity. So actually, I think this is a perfect segue to jump to Jordan. You've been in Houston. I want to know what your experience was during and after Harvey.
Yeah, so my personal experience, I underestimated really just how bad it would come the storm. Because we're used to hurricanes coming and going and just being like a one-day thing, rain event, and just expecting a one-day flood, but this was just so much worse than that. And some people weren't prepared for it, and so, well, really, I guess the whole city wasn't prepared because certain parts of the city that never get flooded at all got flooded this time around. And really it was all due to the development that's been going on in the west side of Houston. All these new neighborhood subdivisions, strip malls, of course, that all adds to concrete. And well, there's just no proper drainage. And here in Houston, we're known as the Bayou City because of all of our natural reservoirs and bayous, and we have them for a reason because they naturally drain rainwater, but they cannot properly perform the drainage if we have concrete and all these buildings and such. They weren't capable enough to retain all the rainwater. And they flow from west to east. So even the subdivisions that are on the east side of downtown got flooded due to all the development that was happening on the west side. And to further add to that issue is we have not a natural, man-made reservoir, called the AIAS Reservoir on the west side that is intended to hold a lot of rainwater, but it even reached its peak, and it was at dangerous levels of erupting and just, letting all the water out. So the mayor of our city had to make a tough decision of whether to release the water, or just to let it continue overflowing and let the neighborhoods next to it flood. And well, he made the decision just releasing the water from it. So yeah, definitely infrastructure was a kind of a cause and I would say an issue that needs to be resolved. Maybe not just here in Houston, but I'm sure in other cities that are affected by flooding have their own particular issues with either canals or development and highways and such. So yeah, our problem is really just all the developments. Fortunately, I was not affected by the flood. My house did not get flooded, but certain parts of my neighborhood did, which was just kind of surprising that even within one neighborhood, where depending on where you live, you could get flooded or not. So, yeah.
I find that pretty interesting when there's so much inertia in the way we've always done things, in the way we've always built roads, in the way we've always provided infrastructure for so much impervious surface. And the problem with that is that the water then has nowhere else to go than right through it, and it moves very quickly. And so instead of flooding events happening over landscaped areas or ecology or bioswales or wetlands and being absorbed into the ground and infiltrating, they're rushing through our impervious surfaces in incredible rates. And so we get issues where the flooding happens very quickly and unexpectedly, and it becomes really hard to deal with that issue. And so there's a balance that I think we need to strike with the gray infrastructure that we've built, the pipes, sewers, bridges, man-made reservoirs, all of this gray infrastructure that we've built in order to get water away from important areas like buildings and roads as quickly as possible. We need to find that balance with green infrastructure that allows water to actually seep into the ground like it always was supposed to, in order to provide more resiliency against flooding events or hurricanes or typhoons, or the damage that can happen with all of that water moving as quickly as it tends to.
Yeah, I agree. I think we're all hitting the points that I think we as sustainable architects are processing, and it's really making everybody aware of this, changing the norm. Paul, I think you said it really well when you said we're getting too comfortable in the way that we're designing with permeable or impermeable paving. And we need to change the lens with which we're looking at the universe and the urban planning development as just urban planning as a whole. I also think that right now we're sort of jumping back and forth between the terms sustainability and resiliency. And I think that recently we've sort of gone through a vocabulary revolution where resiliency is really starting to pick up steam. And I want to know what your thoughts are and what do you think the difference between these two terms is?
I kind of have a pet peeve about the misuse of those two terms. So something that is sustainable might not necessarily be resilient, and something that is resilient might not necessarily be sustainable. Or green, for example. So, for example, using bamboo it's a green material, but it's not sustainable because the amount of resources it takes to harvest bamboo is quite large. So there's a balance that you have to strike when using the terms. I think sustainability became a buzzword very quickly. They were like, look at our sustainable glass windows that cover the entire building, which is like the opposite of what sustainability actually is. And so I think terminology is really important, but understanding that sustainability is much more than where we get our materials from and how much energy we're using. It's also about how well does your design last against, an earth that isn't static. Like our architecture tends to be static and the earth is not. Things move, things flow, things die, things happen. And so it's important to make sure that when we're thinking about these terms, we know that, things have to adapt or they die. Like just, natural selection has been going on for thousands and millions of years. And so, the organisms that didn't adapt, they died. And so it's funny how we're trying to create these lasting infrastructures that last forever in a world that that isn't static. So there's a balance that needs to be struck between those terms for sure.
Yeah, sustainability. Like architects have been doing sustainable things for as long as we've been designing. As far as sustainability is not just a LEED accreditation; it's sun design and wind, calculating all that stuff. And so, the topic of what Paul was saying, where the world isn't static, that's absolutely true. But I think that's part of why you see some of the infrastructures designed the way they are. Like for me, growing up in Texas and kind of picking back what Jordan was saying, Dallas doesn't get a lot of rain except for like a month out of the year. But that 1 month isn't designed for that. And so we constantly are flooded, right? Same with growing up in El Paso, Texas. It's a desert region. So during the 1-2 months of monsoon season, it's just everything's flooded and you can't do anything. And I think it's the frequency of what is happening that affects our terms of like sustainability and resiliency.
As they were saying, there's definitely a big difference between sustainability and resilience. But something that is important is that, and from our perspective, is that if we don't do our city and our buildings thinking in a sustainable way, that's why we have to think after about resilience, because we're it's kind of like a consequence of one, because you didn't expect to have like this big hurricane, and now like after the hurricane you see like architecture is not working well because you didn't put like better better materials, better structure, you didn't put like better way
drainage
to
systems.
drainage
Like Paul was talking about our impermeable surfaces.
Mm-hmm.
We have a lot of those in the island. We construct everything in concrete, and there are very little wooden structures. And it happens like we think that we design, or at least I think from this mentality that we design, think about sustainability, but we, at least in the island, they think that they put enough sustainable design into the actual design, but then when a catastrophe hits like hurricane, a flood, or a drought, we notice that that isn't really taken into consideration, and then we have to make a backup plan for the actual event. And that's the difference, at least in my point, that sustainability is not the same thing as resiliency. Sustainability is an active thought. Resiliency is an afterthought.
Yeah. And something that we like so far, we've really been focusing on hurricanes and flooding. But Maria, like you said, there's the whole other side to it. There's the potential for droughts. And recently, literally in 2017, not only did we have this massive hurricane season, but there was the largest wildfire in California history. And as somebody from Los Angeles, but currently living in Pittsburgh, it was crazy to watch this growing. It was about a mile away from my family when I was like knee deep in my thesis. And I was just like, how can we help? Like, I'm across the country. How can I lend a hand? Like, what are we doing that's so like unproductive that nothing can be prevented? Obviously, this is because they really had not a lot of rainfall in 2017, and it caused the trees to be really susceptible to fires. And the winds that come every year and start tiny fires really sparked one that was larger than ever in history. And really just finding the materials and the construction strategies and the mentalities that can prevent maybe not the beginning, but the spread of these things and the large impact of them. Because even though they may already be inevitable, we can limit the extent that they have. I think that so far we've really been focusing on what makes a city resilient. I think I'm going to change gears a little bit and challenge you guys to really talk about what makes a school or a firm resilient. Because even though it's really critical that what we design and what we build is resilient, there's something about our day-to-day lives that also needs to be resilient. Resiliency can stretch beyond the urban world. So yeah, and you can also touch upon a chapter specifically if you want to.
Yeah, that was like a very interesting point you made, Amy, about resiliency. It's just more, I think resiliency is more than just defending against natural disasters and stuff. I think resiliency is just defending yourself against whatever may come your way. So it can also come in terms of like, you know, like in community design, like how is your design resilient in such a way that the user can still survive? Like, you know, a lot of low-cost housing, you know, like how can this user still survive or overcome poverty after you build a house? And that's, I think that's very important, and I think design can really help change that. But in terms of chapters, I think like how do we make a chapter resilient? I think it's through a lot of education. I think just educating and exposing students and chapter members to you know, like advocacy stuff, you know, like things that we're talking about right now. Like we need to be knowledgeable in all these and we need to be educated and knowledgeable in stuff that might happen, like, you know, sustainability, you know, like diversity, all this, like that's great topics. And to be resilient against something, I think chapters need to host events or, you know, panel discussions, have like, you know, events with the community, that kind of giving knowledge to members or exposing members to certain type of situations would help a chapter be resilient. I don't know if that answers your question, but yeah.
Definitely. Adam, maybe you want to expand upon that from the lens of freedom by design.
Yeah, that'd be great. So freedom by design, we've always actually, just kind of a pretext, during forum we talked about resiliency, so this is awesome. So with freedom by design and what it can do to benefit a chapter, you have a chance to engage with the community and actually learn what issues are going on. So kind of like what Maria was talking about with her studio and getting involved with what the community actually needs. That's exactly what freedom by design does, right? But it's outside of studio. And it gives students another lens to talking about, you know, oh, well, this is what it might be like, but I'm not actually there. By using freedom by design, you get to go out and actually see what's going on. But the cool thing about it is you get to see how it's affecting your neighborhood, right? So you live in it already, but maybe you've kind of, maybe not oblivious to it, but not seeing what's going on. And so freedom by design helps you engage in that way.
I totally agree with you on that point that freedom by design focuses a lot on what resiliency is and what people need. But actually, oh, I'm sorry. Okay. But actually, after this, before this, in the hurricane, our chapter had a lot of activities planned for the whole trimester, and we were really focused on raising money for us to be able to go to a forum. But when the hurricane hit, we were like, okay, we have to stop focusing on what we need, but what our students need. How can we help them? We had a lot of students basically lose their whole house to the hurricane, and we started to raise money to help them make their houses again. Our presidency and the whole university started to make our GoFundMe that they later on distributed the money between the people who were most affected. And we had food drives that we later gave each student that was affected a bag with food and first aid necessities that we don't really think about actually. We were talking about food and water, but we never thought about hygienic purposes and how to actually stay in communication with your fellow students. That's actually also something that a chapter has to have to be resilient. Because you might have Facebook communication and you might have their emails, but in a crisis like this where your communication antennas fail, you have to have at least their phone number so that you can text them and ask them, are you okay? Do you need anything? Can we help you in any way? Do you need transportation? Do you need help caring for a family member? And I think that's how we apply resiliency in our chapter. And I know that the other universities in the island also applied their resiliency in that way too.
And I think, tying into that, connection, like you said, is really important, but also a relentless, continuous search for what's new and what's coming, because one of the hardest things to do is to actually stay up to date with what's going on. With the speed of technology nowadays, there seems to be a new tool or a new app or a new way of thinking that is coming along, that it's really hard to keep up when you are also trying to learn and practice. And so it's one of the benefits of continuing education credits in the profession, and that forces professionals to stay up to date with what's going on, because it's really hard to do so when you're in the thick of learning and when you're in the thick of practicing. So I think resiliency, it's one of the harder things to do. And so that's why a lot of people don't do it, and which is why a lot of people rest on their laurels and rest on what they've already know, because they've already figured it out. The friction is reduced for things that we know, and going into the unknown tends to be a costly endeavor, but also risky. So I think there needs to be tools to make that transition and that adoption of resilient methods and techniques a lot easier.
I agree. I think that in order to make this easier, we have to make it common, and we have to create almost a movement. Like, there's a lot of movements going on right now because everything, at least in our national climate, there's a lot just going on, and there's a lot of conversations being started, but not a lot of action. And something that I think that we're all referencing right now is the need to get out and get things done and work together in order to get things done, because one person cannot achieve this on their own. We need to have community-led efforts. We need to band together, find each other's assets, and exploit them for the purpose of everybody's success and resiliency. I think what Adam touched upon with Freedom by Design can be applied in other realms as well. Something that our chapters and our members do, if they, for instance, have not created a Freedom by Design chapter, is they work with external organizations that are doing this already, like Habitat for Humanity. Camila, would you mind talking about your experience with that?
As part of, after we hit with the hurricane, I was working as a volunteer with Habitat for Humanity. Also, I was working at the same time with an architecture firm that also was working with them, and it was really sad, first of all, and it was really good at the same time that I could help with my architecture's knowledge, to help other people understand how we can do your, it was kind of like a do by your own reconstructions, and I was do it yourself, I'm sorry, and how you can have like better materials, and you can put like a proper installation, because most of these people, the problem is not that they were wooden houses. Most of all, it was actually the installation that they didn't thought about the structure or anything. So that's what I was helping at. And as I told before, with the I'm working right now with the blue tarp, and that's another thing that I'm helping, like the workers not just install the tarp, but how they can install properly, and at the same time telling the owners, like, if you're gonna redo your house, trying to do it in this way, not in that way, because all of the houses that I have gone and all the people that I have spoken with, um, basically it was a problem of structure, like an installation. They didn't do it properly, or they just thought that it was gonna handle it, like it was gonna resist the hurricane. So that's basically what I was doing.
Great, thanks. Yeah, I think this is really engaging more of the professional realm of the question. Like, we've been starting to talk about how chapters can work to be more resilient with one another, or just within their own realm of progress and realm of success. But you're right, it's definitely, we're still students, but we are going to become professionals. AIAS is sort of that bridge, right, between architectural education and the profession. And if we prepare our members and our fellow students to go out into the world with this mentality, then they'll be able to actually handle this and confront it from a more objective perspective. I think this sort of gears into the next question, which is, how has regional cooperation strengthened national and local efforts to reduce disaster risk? Whether or not you want to continue talking about this, Camila, Maria, or Jordan, if you maybe want to go into whether or not, I know you're currently working at a firm, so I'm wondering if you guys have actually participated in any of these efforts, or if maybe there's something you've done personally.
I have a question. Can you define regional cooperation?
Define it.
Yeah.
Basically cooperating as a community effort, whether it is a small town or a citywide initiative, but a region of sorts. And this can be between a myriad of parties. It can be architects, engineers, public servants. It can be regular community members as well.
Okay. So in regional cooperation, we had a lot of communities that went out and cleared roads themselves and are actually installing their own power, because the power companies have not yet gone to install their power for them. So in that regional cooperation, that's how we're seeing it most in our communities. And we also have a lot of workshops where people from the community go and they help you redesign your own home and tell you which is the best way to actually make it so if another hurricane comes, your house will not go flying away. I actually work in a firm where my boss did in Ponce, which is the south side of the island, and they talked about how it's not the materials you use, it's more who actually installs it. So you need someone who's certified that can install everything instead of just your uncle and your aunt and your cousin helping you tack down a roof. And for local efforts, it was more about how the government helped in these initiatives. We had help from FEMA, obviously, because they're disaster relief corporation, basically, and we had governmental and municipal help from each mayor from our towns, and they are advocates for each town that so that their power can come on again, so that people can go clear roads, so that we can have a lot of our bridges reconstructed, because from the floodwaters, bridges fell and have left, till this day, a lot of communities abandoned. There's no way to get to them other than by crossing a very rickety made structure to get to that town. And cars going through rivers so that they can get to the town and give people the supply. So that's how regional cooperation has helped in the rebuilding of Puerto Rico post Maria.
Another thing is that we, like, after this, a lot of architects and engineers and environmental engineers, like structural engineers, environmental engineers, and agriculture persons. They have been doing like these plans, and actually they have been sharing for everyone like how we can prevent this stuff, and they have been like trying to put new codes and other things. So after this we can follow them and we can do a better Hello?
We're still here. You're still on air.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, I think we missed the last thing. Something cut off in the sound, but I think, yeah, we understand your point. I think you're right. I think it's really just, it's how we can actually make an impact, and it's how we can positively view these issues and not necessarily dwell on what's happened, but move forward. Jordan, did you have anything? Yeah. Oh, Adam or Kevin.
Oh, yeah. So I think one of the most important things too, especially working in like a community process design, it's also listening to people. I think that is one of the most important things that a lot of architects or even like architectural students kind of miss, is that we don't really listen as much as we should. So I had the opportunity to work with Ubuntu Design Group. I'm not sure if you guys know that. It's started by Wendy Lee, who was one of our past president in our chapter. But so I think 2 years ago, or last year, we went to South Africa, and so we did a low-cost housing prototype. And so Ubuntu Design Group is basically, it's a nonprofit design firm that is specializing in creating low-cost housing prototype in South Africa. And their main motto of the firm is listen to build. And the main reason is because, you know, like, yes, we can promote really great ideas, we can promote really great designs, but we are not the ones living in the house eventually. We are not the people, we are not living in the community, we are not being affected by the design decisions that we made. And so it's really, really important to listen to them. And so when we went to South Africa, we actually had tons of community process, like workshops that we had. Because South Africa has this really cool thing where the land is owned by tribal land. So the tribal leaders do own the land. So we had a presentation with the tribal leaders. We had a presentation with the municipality of Durban. We had a workshop with the high school students to, you know, get to know ideas. And trust me, like when we went there, we thought we knew everything, and we thought we could, like, we were like, oh, we're gonna present you this really amazing idea. But then we went there and we were like stunned because we did not know anything. And like, you know, we didn't live there. We were not from there. And we didn't really understand. And so talking to them and really immersing ourselves and really listening to people or the community really, really helps in that design process. And I think it really helps. It's a really crucial part of doing resilient design in architecture.
Definitely. I think that this is how we can actually implement these types of developments. I think it takes a variety of regional and organizational mechanisms to actually make these priorities happen. Jordan?
Yeah, just kind of building off of what Kevin stated. So I think I would say further research is still needed specifically in the cities and the affected areas that normally get flooded or are ravaged by natural disasters. Because even though we may know, oh, it's gonna flood or whatever, but if nothing else gets done, then there's obviously a problem, or there's obviously something missing. And I think with these storms that we've had, it kind of changes everything just because of the scale and the destruction that came with. And I think really and I think an example of it is here in Houston, our own mayor is kind of pushing the city council, and also working with the local AIAS Houston chapter here to inform us, trying to get our feedback, our opinions on, should we change some of the code regulations that the city applies for, where can you build your house? Because before it was, not within the 100-year plan, there's, some restrictions, and now they're thinking if you're within the 500-year plan, now there's going to be even more restrictions of building something there. So now they've reached out to us and kind of asking, what do we think? Do we have any questions? because he wants to make this proposal and this change, but also, of course, trying to inform at least the general public, making them aware of these changes because it will affect, future development and, you know, current homeowners. Um, I would say definitely more research on behalf of either the city planning officials, but even us as students and recent graduates can still take on this challenge because we only know so much, and even within the city, especially as Houston, it's a very large city. Um, Demographics change from within, crossing the street, and you may know everything within just your neighborhood, but it can be completely different just a few blocks down, and they can have different issues affecting them. Um, so it's not just saying, okay, well, I didn't get flooded, or I don't not dealing with the same issues. Well, it's not really so much that you have to be open and be able to just listen to other people's just the thoughts and see, what you're proposing. Oh, I'm gonna build this to storage whatever office building in, without really thinking of the implications or consequences it may have further down the line of your next door neighbor and such. So it's really just having more open dialogue, more research. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Jordan. I think that's a point that we haven't really touched upon yet. It's the fact that we can have all of these great ideas and we can have all these potential community-led initiatives, but when it comes down to it, there's policies in place that might not necessarily support this, and being able to question those and really be able to do the research and do the work necessary to make this change happen. I want to allow, I believe we have a professor along with Maria and Camila who's going to join us. Amaya, would you mind joining in on the discussion?
Hi, well, I'm the Professor Omaira Rivera. They are in class right now. What exactly are you looking for? What do you want me to?
How communities, how regional corporations strengthen national and local efforts to reduce disaster risk?
Well, I believe that this is crucial because, for example, in IT, I read an article about what not to do. And something that happened is that many people wanted to help and start building stuff, and later they leave, and that many of this construction didn't work after all. Even the article said that most of the construction is now ghost towns. That doesn't work because it's not what the people really needed. And it wasn't with their effort. You need to get people involved, not just in the design, but also in the construction to know exactly how to inhabit that place and to make it their own. And it's very important to that like this kind of projects. It cannot be without the participation of the community.
Yes, it's basically something like Kevin was saying about when he went to South Africa, that it's not just like designing, like you need to get the people involved because at the end they're the one that are gonna live it, just like he was saying. Mm-hmm. So basically, what the workshop that she has done that is called Taller Creando Sin Encargo, and after Maria and with our tesis, that's what she's trying to
emphasize.
Yes.
Yeah, it is important also because. This kind of efforts help people, but it's not just helping people; it's working with the people in rebuilding the place. Like right now, many people in Puerto Rico wants to just design houses, but many people is living in Puerto Rico. And why to design more houses? Why not to inhabit the places that are abandoned right now in place of? And then you need to see the particular situations in every place that you visit. And to understand that, you need to work with the people. And that's important, I believe.
Yeah. And that's really interesting because I think one of the things that a lot of people forget when we are talking about sustainability and resiliency is that it's not just the environment, but it's also the economy and it's also the social equity part. part of it. And I think resiliency is, I think a lot of us talk about sustainability, we immediately just think about like, you know, solar panels or like things that are architecturally like helps to better the environment. But I've heard that it's also about the community, it's about the economy, and it's about of the community. And I think one firm that really does really well in that is Mass Design Group. Who they are, but group is very conscious on a project that whenever they go into a place or into a community, they are creating jobs for people. So they are really tapping into this local industry and creating an industry for the community, so that, you know, they are teaching them how to build stuff, and they're teaching them, like, they're passing on the knowledge and stuff like that. And I think that you know, in a community, because you're teaching a community to be resilient and to be able to support themselves and to teach them skills and, you know, pass them knowledge and stuff like that. So I think that's one thing that to like gloss over when we talk about this kind of topic, to remember that, you know, we're dealing with people, we have to think about the social equity of it.
I agree, Kevin. I think we are sort of out of time, but I think that I'm just going to jump ahead to the last question that I sent you all before this call and address you all so that we can really touch upon how much of resiliency do we feel relies on social change? Like, how can we as advocates and as designers inspire a greater movement towards a more equitable and positive future, whether we're talking about fellow architecture students or anyone?
So I'm going to jump in on that one really fast. So the idea of social change is drastically important. Right now, IIT's Freedom by Design program is working with a group called Sweetwater Foundation. They're based out of the south side of Chicago, which historically has been very a pretty bad neighborhood. And it's through the social change. They're teaching design, right? They're teaching how different things that we do to affect the built environment and affect social justice just greatly improves life. So it's so important. Like, I cannot emphasize how important it is.
One of my favorite quotes from Bjarke Ingels is sustainability and resiliency doesn't have to hurt. And that's what a lot of people think about when they think about these topics and issues, is that they're losing or giving up quality of life. And I definitely think that we as designers have the responsibility to show them that we can actually achieve both. We can actually improve quality of life and live in a more sustainable manner that saves resources, that generates income, that provides jobs, that provides shelter, that provides food. And so it's just a matter of getting the word out there and saying, hey, we have a better way of doing this. And this better way of doing it actually achieves what we need it to achieve and moves us in a positive direction. And we'd like you all to be a part of it, because everyone needs to do their part. Everyone needs to pull their own weight. And I think, you know, we need to do a better job of being advocates to not only ourselves and our clients, but also the public, which our designs often affect a lot. So.
Something else that I wanted to say is, in Puerto Rico, we've been talking a lot about that people need to move from certain places that are prone to flooding or that are very steep. But you cannot do that without the people. This is a process. A participatory process is not from one day to the other. You need to talk with the people and understand how the community works before to say, okay, you all need to move somewhere else. It's not just like that. You really need to understand how they live, to be able to know exactly how they can move if they really need to move, because they're in a very dangerous place. And without a process, that's not possible. It's just taking the people, moving them somewhere else where they don't belong, and there's no sense of community.
You might be thinking that you're fixing a problem, but then you're creating another problem. And that's where social change actually comes into play, because if you only think about economic standpoint, well, it's a great idea, but from a humanitarian standpoint, you can't change a person's routine day from night. And I think that a lot of Puerto Ricans have noticed in the past 6 months that it's not about where you live, but it's more about how you live there and how this community has evolved and how you can help your neighbor, how can you help everyone around you, and how can you make the land where you're living a better, sustainable, resilient land. And if it's not safe, then sadly you will have to move, but it's like when you're growing up, you have baby steps. You start by crawling, then you walk, and then you run, but you can't just run from the get-go.
I think that was a great way to pull this conversation to a close, really leaving this on the air of building resilience through the power of neighbors and through the power of working together. So I just want to say thank you to everybody that took the time this evening to join this call, and to everybody watching this. I hope that this inspires some conversations on local chapter campuses, and that on behalf of the Advocacy Task Force, I thank you for all of your efforts, and hopefully we can continue propelling forward as individuals and as designers.
Yeah.
Thanks,
you guys, for a great conversation.
Thank you guys for the great company.
See you later.
Bye.